Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part. And we are glad to have a special guest tonight, Brother Cameron Mayers from the great state of Mississippi. But before we go down that way, we'll introduce ourselves. So I am one of your co-hosts, Greg Knott.
And I'm Roger Van Gordon.
And I'm Darin Laners. And as Greg mentioned, our guest tonight is Cameron Mayers from the Grand Jurisdiction of Mississippi. I met Cameron through our good friend Lucas Minton. Lucas introduced me to Cameron, and we've kind of chatted via text. This is my first time speaking to Cameron, so it's a pleasure of mine to get to talk to him face to face virtually at least. And hopefully one of these days we will meet each other in person. Cameron, why don't you just go ahead and give us your kind of Masonic bio, and then we'll just start off. So,
First of all, just thank you for having me again. My name is Cameron Tyrell Mayers, originally from Pearl, Mississippi, where, like we just mentioned, under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, was initiated and raised in April 89 out of Starkville, Mississippi, where I'm currently sitting senior warden. In a plethora of many appended bodies just throughout Masonry, a member of Scimitar Shriners out in Little Rock, a dual member of the Valleys of Hattiesburg and Valleys of Little Rock, recent member of the Grotto, recent member of the York Rite, and just overall sponge of Masonic information and just anything that I can attach to myself at my young age.
So I know personally you just joined Grotto last Thursday, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What grotto are you a member of?
I am a member of Amrita out in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Okay. Yeah, Greg and I were curious. We're members of Illini Grotto out of Mahomet, Illinois. So, I was actually texting with Lucas, and he told me you were joining Grotto that night, and we were having a meeting that night actually at Greg's clubhouse, I'll call it. So, I guess congratulations, Prophet. Welcome to Grotto. So I guess we'll just open up the floor, start off, Greg, let you kind of start and go to Roger and then...
Well, yeah, Cameron, great to have you. Appreciate you being here. You sound pretty much like the three of us. You've joined everything, and you just, I practice no, but I'm not very good at it. I keep finding ways to get involved in more stuff. So Cameron, you're right on track with the rest of us, apparently. My basic question, this is what I ask everybody, sometimes I ask myself, what was the initial attraction to Freemasonry, before all the appendant bodies and things? What brought you to the Blue Lodge itself?
I'll say I probably have known about Freemasonry since I would say I was younger, even though I look significantly young to those who are watching right now. I am I would say, grateful, fortunately and unfortunately, for having unfiltered access to the internet growing up. So around early 2010, seeing, open things of conspiracies, or this celebrity is introduced is a part of the Illuminati / Freemasonry. That was the first time I remember ever hearing kind of the word. Kind of just research from there, just knowing like, oh, this is some sort of fraternity. Me being, I think, 5th grade is when I first heard, and kind of just like went down the rabbit hole. I just kind of always knew in the back of my mind. I had uncles that were members of Prince Hall. My dad is a member of Prince Hall out of the most worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas. So kind of always semi-like can do it, especially in Mississippi where you're kind of growing up. People are either a part of Greek life or in some type of just African-American based fraternal system. So you would see car tags that say, with a square and compass that said PHA. Me not knowing what PHA at the time, but just recognizing what that symbol was. Once I got into college, I kind of just knew that, hey, this is something that I'm interested in. I kind of just knew for the Grand Lodge that I was able to do it once I turned 18. Randomly found a man at a car wash during prime COVID time that had a square and compass decal on the back of his truck and said, hey, I'm wanting to be a Mason. How can I do that? Him being a Prince Hall Mason at the time, and probably unbeknownst to just a random kid in a mask asking how to be a Freemason, said, hey, just go online and look up how to be a Freemason in Mississippi. That quick Google search led me to the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, where I submitted my inquiry through their website. And I'd say 2 days later, our former secretary, God rest his soul, Jimmy Vaughn, reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're having dinner at our lodge on Monday. Are you able to come out?" And the rest is history.
Well, that's you know, it's those little things. I mean, if the guy's not at the car wash and didn't have the square and compass, you might it might have taken a while longer. Yeah, isn't it funny just how you have those little random things? That's kind of what it was. For me, I was talking to a couple friends years ago, and same, we talked about it forever, and I was like, we just need a petition and move forward with it, and of course, glad I did. Yeah, so it's so funny how life just has those little things, and of course, you're a Masonic, legacy member with your dad and other relatives at being Freemasons as well, so, yeah, you're kinda lucky in a way 'cause I had some relatives that were Freemasons, but they never talked about it, it was I really never knew till their Masonic funeral, and so and my dad was not one, so I didn't really have it there, was always kind of intrigued with it like you and did a little early internet search to get here, but nonetheless, I'm glad you found your way into the fraternity, and yeah, that's just great. So what's your experience in Mississippi? I mean, I think a question is why mainstream versus not Prince Hall, or did you look at both of them, or how did that go?
I'll answer that second question first. I would really say it was kind of more so ignorance on my end. Whenever I'm asked about it, because of course, to many people, I'm most likely the first African American person in the Grand Lodge of Mississippi that they've ever encountered. And anytime I speak on it, just saying, "Oh, I'm from the Grand Lodge of Mississippi," and people surprise, "Oh, you're not Prince Hall," of course, me being African American, it's kind of a shock to people, honestly, which very much understand, kind of given just everything that's gone on within Masonry in the South and Masonry, especially in Mississippi. I'd say really ignorance is kind of the answer to that. I didn't know anything about Prince Hall. I just thought those were three letters that just appeared somewhere in Masonry that I could just would find out once I got in. I remember quick comment that our former secretary said when I first got in saying, "Hey, I'm just letting you know there's no African Americans in this lodge." And I said, kind of looked at him and said, "Okay, I just left a history class in prime election season, me being the only black guy in my class. I'm used to kind of being the only one in the room." And so we kind of had a quick little laugh about that. But that was really the first instance of maybe there was a divide somewhere that I just didn't know. Really up until my raising, when I kind of semi went viral across the South in social media of the Masonic world of people saying, "Oh, like, why didn't you go Prince Hall?" And I quickly said I didn't know anything about it. And unfortunately, when I went on the website, just the guy that was at the car wash, Stringer Prince Hall does not have a website, or at least a public website that you can access to. So me hearing just go to a website, how to be a Freemason, Mississippi, if it only leads you to the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, that's just how the cookie crumbles at the end of the day.
Well, you know what? I think it just proves the importance of having a public presence online, because
Mhm.
that's certainly your generation, that's how they're finding us, so that's I mean, just we won't go down that tangent. We've talked about social media and communications and other podcasts, but it just clearly illustrates that's how people are finding us today is doing the web searches, so anyway, great. Roger, let me pass it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, Cameron, of the 3 of us, I'm probably the most blunt of the group. Now, Greg and Darin are fine, subtle gentlemen, but, uh, but I'm there to stir up something.
I got my
We're
pot
we're
ready.
No, that's great. We're from the Midwest, right? And and we're not as diverse as what you would find in maybe, a District of Columbia north, on the seaboard or on the West Coast. But I will say that last Saturday, an African American brother was elected the Grand Commander of our Knights Templar here in Indiana, and in my Valley of Scottish Rite, we have several African American brothers. The country's got stereotypes. Can you tell me what has been your experience as an African American brother in Mississippi, in
Mm,
our obedience and in what is often referred to as Grand Lodge of State. What's been your experience?
yeah. Thank you for the question again. First, I'd like to say a disclaimer. I do not speak on behalf of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi or any opinion bodies that I may or may not be a part of. Just to get that out of the way real quick before we start stirring the pot. But overall, my experience has been great. I would say that my lodge is quote unquote deemed as a very progressive lodge and just the way that we do things, and obviously accepting me and me moving up the chairs as quickly as that I've been. I mean, I would say that my overall experience has been great, but that would be a disservice to you and a disservice to me because at the end of the day, my experience hasn't been all sunshines and rainbows. There's definitely been some brothers that have exclaimed that I'm not a brother in their eyes. One of the first instances that pop up was when the week before I was raised, I was made aware of someone in Mississippi, in the southern part of Mississippi, and people who know this situation closely probably know exactly what I'm speaking about, who said the Soul Train degree team is coming to Starkville, and on our menu, it will be fried chitlins, watermelon, and Kool-Aid. And so I kind of laughed because I thought, this isn't real. Like, that was my first instance of, oh, there were deeper things than Mississippi and deeper things of what I meant to the Grand Lodge of Mississippi than I truly realized. And after I was raised, that was kind of the first instance of hate comments that I kind of got or slights towards me and things like that. Just how I mentioned earlier, and again, this is my experience, how I mentioned that I'm a part of appendant bodies that are outside of Mississippi. The reason that I am is because I was not voted in because I, am 5'7". Me being 5'7" is a little quirk that me and other people that I'm close to in my Masonic journey say because, hey, Cameron is fortunately African American, but unfortunately, other people just don't like that fact. That's the reason why my shrine membership is outside of Mississippi. That's the reason why my York Rite membership is out of Mississippi. Just, unfortunate things that are in our state, and that's a part of my overall Masonic journey, which I am grateful for. But it is unfortunate that, hey, I have to go outside of state to join appendant bodies for my overall Masonic journey. It is unfortunate that I do have to run into people who openly say, hey, you can't sit in lodge with me in my own state or in cities that I grew up going to for the 23 years that I've been a resident of Mississippi. So overall, I would say 90% of my experience has been positive, but that 10% is just, an unfortunate part of my Masonic journey.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I'm very active in my Grand Lodge and I'm a past Grand Master and I'm one of the senior past Grand Masters as I was Grand Master a number of years ago. And one of the first things I tell an incoming Grand Master is that Freemasonry is of high ideals of which we all aspire, but you must remember we're men first and we're men of our culture and our time first. And among your biggest challenge is getting men of their time and their culture to live these high ideals. And I think uh, that's something in the country, which you have subcultures and regions and even in states. And that is something that we as Masons, we aspire to these ideals while being ordinary men living in our current culture and our current times. Now, let me ask you this: your lodge. Can you tell me a little bit more about your lodge, about how many members you have, and maybe what the age groups are, and things like that, so we have a little bit better idea of the. It sounds as if your lodge, as you said earlier, is progressive. So can you tell us just a little bit about your lodge?
Yeah, I would say I'm not the youngest since one of the great things about our lodge being in Starkville is we're in a college town, home of the best university in the SEC, Mississippi State University. So kind of having just that in and out. And unfortunately, good fortune and unfortunate is that you can see younger members come in, but also unfortunately that with us being a college town, we know that you're probably going to get maybe average probably 2 to 4 years just out of someone if they try to be initiated and raised all in their freshman year. So I'd say I'm the second youngest that's currently active that is living or regularly attends. But other than that, most of our members are around the ages of 40 to late 70s. So mostly a mix or a majority of older individuals, older seasoned Masons just in their own right. And then you kind of have your sporadic younger Masons, some that aren't necessarily as active, but still pay their dues regularly to the lodge as well.
Now, I'm assuming, my Grand Lodge, it takes a unanimous ballot to get elected to membership. Is that true in Mississippi as well?
Correct.
Okay. So, obviously, the brothers, when they voted on your petition, knew that you were a young black man, and obviously, they didn't look at that. They looked at the content of your character, right? Which is wonderful. That's the way it's supposed to be. So I find it interesting that you found the right lodge to petition and that your journey so far you're junior junior warden or senior warden?
I
You're
am senior warden.
pardon me?
Senior warden as of right
Senior
now.
warden. So now are you on a calendar year, January to December?
Yes.
Okay, so you expect to be master of your lodge then this next year then, correct?
God willing, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful. I think this is absolutely wonderful. Have you had a lot of brothers come and talk to you about your experience? Brothers
Ab
there in your area, have they
Yeah.
talked to you about your experience?
Yeah, really just not only in the area, just all across the state and all across the country, really, whether you be a Grand Lodge Estate member or even a Prince Hall member. I think I'm kind of really an anomaly, not only just because of my race just within the Grand Lodge, but also my age. You don't really see a lot of younger Masons and especially a lot of younger active Masons that kind of just delve into it as much as they can. And really just me sticking out like a sore thumb in a good way is something that people gravitate to. And of course, people say that, hey, you're a very personal person. You're someone that can easily talk to and just like hold a conversation about your experience within Masonry and what you think about kind of just like the global atmosphere of what our fraternity is currently is. So I'd say that's one of the good things just about being able to speak to members, just not only in my area, but in the greater world abroad as well.
Great. Darin? I'll pass off to Darin.
Well, I think Cameron, I don't know that Roger knows the entire backstory about why you're currently senior warden of your lodge. So I think maybe we share a little bit about that story. So I'll let you maybe just tell the version of events that happened, and then we can maybe have a little bit of discussion around that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Would that be okay?
So like I said earlier, yeah, like I said earlier, this is an open box, kind of just like open box parking lot talk, how you described it earlier. I I will give a little backstory. I was raised in November of 2022 and was immediately put into a chair the following month. Well, voted into a chair the following month as junior warden. I had been junior warden from 2023 to 2024, 2024 to 2025, 2025 to 2026. So staying in the chair for 3 years in a row. Me kind of, if you do the simple math, you'd say, hey, 3 years in a chair, you would already be master or just move up by the time. And, we don't really politic in lodge or, say, hey, one person is going out for chairs and things like that. But it kind of does scratch your head, not only to certain people in my lodge, but also certain people that follow my Masonic journey, since we publicly say, hey, who's in a chair or not. And I publicly speak about what officer role that I'm in for that current year of, hey, why isn't Cameron master? In a conversation that happened earlier, and I won't mention the brother, just keeping it out of privy, one said in a stated meeting, hey, it kind of isn't right that this person is sitting in the chair and has been sitting in the same chair for 3 years. We should probably change that and not even bump them up to a chair, but bump them up all the way to master. This, that conversation came around September of October. We have our elections in December. Me going into the December election thinking, hey, I'm going to be master, considering the most important thing that's going to happen in the Grand Lodge in the next 2 months with our Prince Hall vote, maybe it probably would look a little good in the public eye that I was master and our lodge was presenting this vote. Me expecting fully to be elected master, I'm thinking, hey, let me start calling around people, seeing what dates are they available, since we're going to have to just have our installation in early January, since we have it after the day of St. John's, before our first stated meeting. My lodge's stated meeting is the second Monday of each month. So kind of giving you a short little time frame of finding out dates and things like that. And so going into it that night, we had our dinner and be thinking, hey, I'm going to get elected in. Me kind of texting people saying, hey, like, we're about to have elections. Elections come about, and someone else was put as master and I was put as senior warden. I was a little bummed out. I spoke to several people after, kind of just like not really wanting to go off emotion and kind of just cooling down a little bit, and just said, hey, that this is one of the great and unfortunate parts of masonry is politics and ideals fuel people. So however the lodge voted, the lodge voted. However people viewed just the vote is how they viewed the vote. But we haven't really spoken about it since then as a lodge, because we probably aren't going to. But several people, members of my lodge, have spoken to me about it. And I have obviously voiced very much my opinions on how that vote went.
So, well, I
Okay,
guess
can
the
you
obvious
give me some
question.
back? Yeah. Can you give me some back? I've read some stuff on the internet, but can you give me some background on that relationship between your Grand Lodge, the Stringer Grand Lodge? I've heard things of the Stringer Grand Lodge didn't ask for recognition. It was some other kind of movement. What are the facts of that surrounding that whole recognition vote? And did the Stringer Grand Lodge ask for recognition and the whole 9 yards of
Mhm.
that?
Yes. From what I have known and learned over the past year and a half, with, of course, me being one of the pillars for recognition within Mississippi, let's start in the early 2000s, which is the earliest that I've known that Stringer has reached out to the Grand Lodge of Mississippi for recognition. Those letters were essentially stopped at their grand secretary at the time. I don't know who those individuals were, but you can probably draw your own conclusions on why the secretary didn't make those letters known to the rest of the Grand Line and the greater Grand Lodge and Mississippi community. In 2019, former most worshipful grandmaster of Stringer reached out to our former grandmaster, Jason Jeffcoat, and said, hey, we're wanting to have just like a sit down and just come to kind of just basis on what we can do in moving forward. That letter was sent to him asking for recognition. Jason then forwarded that to many Masonic websites, many Masonic blogs, kind of just getting the word out of, hey, this is happening on kind of a more grander scale. So earlier, that's really the first instance of this was voting back in 2019. That vote, from what I've been told, it was less than 10 votes needed for that recognition to pass back that physical year for Masonry. Of course, COVID happened and things like that. No one really touched it since that vote, and people thought that was going to be dead on arrival in years past. Then, a random kid from Mississippi decided that he wanted to join the Grand Lodge of Mississippi. And those talks kind of came up again of, hey, this is not only someone that is young and active, but this is someone that's outspoken about recognition. Let's try to bring that up again. The first instance in my Masonic career was my second Grand Lodge that it was brought up. So that was in 2025, of us making a floor resolution of, hey, let's have Stringer be recognized. We kind of knew the people who made that floor resolution of, hey, this probably isn't going anywhere, but let's kind of just gauge the area years after and see what kind of people's hearts and minds are. With the unfortunate voting of how our Grand Lodge had voting that year, we knew it probably wasn't going to pass, but eventually just going on and having it anyway. Us as a lodge after that said, hey, next year we're going to have a resolution and actually present it on the floor. And that was this past Grand Lodge year, which again, unfortunately did fail on which unfortunately did fail after the vote. But that's kind of giving a little history on kind of what recognition has been in our Grand Lodge as of now.
Who are the voting delegates in your Grand Lodge to the Grand Lodge session? Who are the voting delegates?
That is all principal officers and all past masters. So
Okay,
how I
so principal officers being a master and the wardens? Is
yes.
that yeah, so you got masters, wardens, and any past master, right? Is that what it is?
Correct.
That's pretty broad.
Yes, I tell people all the time since, again, masonry voting and just masonry customs change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I mean, especially when people say that, hey, that there's people with more than one vote. I always say many people, and especially just depending on, especially this year, Grand Lodge was on a Wednesday. So that's the middle of the week and in the northwestern part of Mississippi in a random casino that I've never heard of before until it was posted that this is where Grand Lodge is going to be. Many people can't take off for work. Obviously, I even have said myself that I took off for school and had to go immediately back to school to finish an exam for my vote. So there's individuals that obviously like have proxies and things like that. So depending on if you are a past master and you say, hey, I'm the only person that in our lodge that's going to be able to go attend, you could be someone that's walking into Grand Lodge with 4 votes that you're able to cast. And you can divide that up in however many, depending on your proxy for that year. My first Grand Lodge year, I was our proxy for all our principal officers just because many of our principal officers in our district are members of other lodges. So my first time attending a Grand Lodge, I had 3 votes that I was able to cast.
That's an interesting system. My Grand Lodge is simple. It's worshipful masters, Grand Lodge officers, and past Grand Masters, and that's it. But we have a pretty sizable Grand Lodge. But so what do you think is going to happen going forward? Do you think that the Stringer Grand Lodge will maybe here in the next few years ask again? Do you think it's going to come back up soon at your Grand Lodge for recognition?
Well, fortunately for Stringer, they only had to ask once, and that original ask was back in 2019. So there's no really need for them to ask again on their end, especially with me being close to their current most worshipful grandmaster with frequent communication that we've had. He knows that, hey, it's going to come up again, and it's going to come up most likely year after year until it eventually passes. So I think the rest of the lodge, well, I would say the rest of the Grand Lodge knows that this isn't the last time that this is going to be brought up, even though some people may have the opinion that it should never be brought up again. But fortunately, there's people who still have progressive minds. Fortunately, there's people who still want to uphold the values of our fraternity as a whole. And unfortunately, there's still me in the lodge, and I'm going to bring it up every year until it gets passed. So
And now, what was the gap again between the yes and no vote for recognition recently?
it was 67% no. I know it was a 60, but 67 is the number that pops into my head. But giving further context to that number, the voting delegates that were in attendance were less than 10% of the membership of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi. So that 67% does not represent the majority of what people may view as their opinions for recognition under the Grand Lodge.
Yeah, no, I understand because of the way that who all you allow to be voting delegates to Grand Lodge is such that it can be skewed quite a bit based on how many votes a person actually does hold. Darin, did you have some other follow up that you want to do?
No, I also, it's my understanding, Cameron, that this year's vote was also a bit complicated by the fact that there were a lot of past masters in attendance for the Masonic trial that didn't occur, and that potentially also skewed the vote not in favor of recognition, and that maybe next year not having that distraction that brought in a lot more of the, let's say, older membership may help benefit the recognition vote. Would that be a fair assessment, or
Oh,
am I
absolutely.
off base?
No, absolutely. Of course, since this is all public record, since the court documents have been public for the past couple of months, many people were excited about Grand Lodge just so they could see a trial. And so when obviously a trial didn't happen, there was still this intense, I would say, passion and fury that a lot of people said, hey, something needs to happen to kind of just ease this down. And unfortunately, Prince Hall being the vote that was still on the table was going to be kind of just something that people pushed their passions and their kind of frustrations towards, whether that be for or against it. So I would say that next year probably does have a better year of passing, considering there have been many people that I spoke to that day that said, I haven't been to a Grand Lodge in years, and I only came for the trial. So that was a good bit of opinions of just the voting delegates in there. And of course, with no trial, people did get up and leave afterwards. But then there were some people that said, no, let's stay because we have another quote unquote issue to worry about, with that being the Prince Hall vote.
And just for our listenership and my own edification, I I know a little bit about what the trial was going to be about, but can you kind of educate at least myself regarding what that whole rigmarole was about? Because it was basically what there was some sort of schism between, was it Grand Lodge officers, or was it between Shrine officers and Grand Lodge officers, or something along those lines? Or I'm maybe confusing it completely? I know it was pretty complex and I know that there was a lot of passions were pretty high. I know around it, but like I said, I don't know a lot of details around it. So if you could help enlighten us, maybe that'd be helpful.
Yeah. It's kind of just a too long didn't read type of situation. I mean, it just happened to be a scuffle between two Grand Lodge officers at the end of the day. There's a deep dive that there's a pretty good Reddit post by someone who made it on the Grand Lodge, someone who's a member of the Grand Lodge on Reddit, that kind of details a play by play of just years and dates and kind of how everything went down. But it was just a scuffle between two people that happened in a grand session proceeding that people kind of just dub as a trial that wasn't the trial. And everyone that was in attendance to it had to witness the 40 something odd minutes of them kind of just speaking back and forth and everyone trying to figure out what was truly going on. That eventually led to court filings and people suing each other or just litigation processes being started. And that's kind of really just the cups of everything that happened. There was also side pieces of the trial that would have been in a shrine center, in one shrine center, and was moved to another shrine center. And Imperial saying, hey, we don't want to be in a part of this. You can't have a trial in our shrine centers. That pushed it all the way back to, hey, the court saying that this needs to be resolved at Grand Lodge. And if it doesn't get resolved at Grand Lodge, we're moving back to actual legal court proceedings for it.
Okay. That's where the shrine was involved then. Okay. Thanks, Cameron. Greg, I think we'll pass back to you. We've been dominating the
Okay.
here.
Well, yeah, lots of exciting things that are going on. Well, Cameron, all that's, I mean, people, I'm sure they always intrigued by all those stories, but I guess, I'm going to go a different direction with you. I'm still, so you kind of told me why you came in the craft. What, as you look ahead, what are your expectations beyond some of those topics we just talked about? What are you hoping to get out of it in the longer run? I mean, for you personally, what do you see as you're on this journey? What's some of your goals with it, other than just an office? What do you hope to learn?
Really to just take everything as a sponge. I've learned so much just given in the short time that I've been a Mason since I was raised right before my 21st birthday, and I'm now 24. So have been a Mason for almost 4 years going on this November. And that's kind of just been my mindset of ever since that I was even not even initiated, but even raised as a whole, is just take everything like a sponge and just take as much knowledge as you can, speak to as many people, whether they be older Masons, more seasoned Masons, younger Masons that are just more like to kind of just my generation, and just hear their experience and what they kind of just like take out of lodge and what they've learned as well. And most of all, travel at the end of the day. I'd say one of the greatest experiences that I've experienced just with travel is, hey, I'm a young 20 guy from Mississippi that is wanting to just further myself in my Masonic journey. That's taking me to the Grand Lodge of DC, the Grand Lodge of Florida, several Grand Lodges in the South that I've had the privilege of visiting. And it's always just a delight of people just taking you in with open arms. And not only that, just wanting to know more about you and just keep up with your Masonic journey as well. There's probably a plethora of people that reach out to me on Facebook Messenger or who have my personal number just saying, hey, I'm just wanting to check in. How's everything going? Not even just regarding Masonry, but just about life in general. And those are probably one of the best conversations that I've had. Many of the people that I consider my Masonic just friends or just true closest brothers just throughout the fraternity are not only people in Mississippi, but people all across the southeastern region as well. And those relationships and those bonds are truly something that I'm going to tell my kids about one day, which is why I get everybody to sign my Masonic Bible whenever I remember it, since it's always in my car. Just, hey, I want to remember these men, not only for the influence that they've had on my life, but to tell their stories long after we're gone as well.
Ye Well, it's exciting to hear you have that enthusiasm, let me just say that. Do you I mean, given your age and generation, and unfortunately, I mean, well, the nice thing is Roger's, like, older than me, so I'm at least not the oldest one on the podcast tonight, but do you see Freemasonry as relevant to your generation? I mean, beyond yourself, do you find other brothers that you think would have an interest in what we do and what we stand for?
I would say so, definitely. It's like I tell many people when people ask me that are kind of just ignorant to Freemasonry of, oh, I thought that was just a club for old guys. With me being in the South, and especially with Greek life being very prevalent, with me going to an SEC school, I always just tell people most of the guys that you've probably seen in interested in Masonry either grew up having a Masonic history or just a Masonic lineage, and their dad or their grandfather was a Mason, and that's the reason why they joined, or they just had some type of fraternal experience in their undergraduate years and are kind of, growing more, getting more older. Kids are out of the house, grandchildren are kind of more older, and just wanting to have just really a social outlet that they can join and develop themselves in. And that's where Masonry pops in. I think I would say, since I'm a member of many fraternal orders, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated being one, which is what's on my hoodie right now, is that several things how to just like delve into Masonry. And many things make sense if you're a part of other fraternal orders that you wouldn't get that experience if you didn't join Masonry. So I'd say Freemasonry in my generation does have its place. And I think in many instances, such as DMLA, that's very prevalent, not only in my state, but also in Arkansas as well, from what I've seen. There's still a purpose for Masonic ties to still hit the youth of our generation. So eventually those people will become 18 and will eventually have a petition in their hands and submit their petitions and eventually be in the same spots that we once were.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I mean, we've had all kinds of other podcast discussions about, where we're at in, numbers and, the cycles of membership over time and all that. And, Darin hears me say, I think at some point it's gonna go the other direction. I always preface that or also say, I don't know if I'll live long enough to see it, but I am convinced that fraternalism is gonna have a resurgence because you can play on social media all day, but at the end of the
Mm,
day, it's all fake, I mean, you do have some true friends too, I'm not saying 100%, but at the end, there's, the relationships of in person, you are deeper than you can have with just somebody online, it's just and I
mhm.
think we have the opportunity to help fill that void, especially for people in your age group, and I'd say 40 and under that have mostly grown up online.
Mhm.
So well, and one other, and then I'll pass it back to Roger. One, I was glad you hear you say Mississippi State is the best university in the SEC, because if you said the nation, since I'm up here in Champaign near a Big Ten school, then we might have had to have a little bit of rival talk here, but no, that's great. So anyway, hey Roger, let me pass it
I
back
will
to you.
say the
Yeah, go
great
ahead, Cam.
rivalry in college football. If anyone wants to say that, I
Yeah.
said the Egg Bowl is the greatest rivalry in college football. If anyone wants to debate that,
Yeah, Greg's got a good point. I too am glad that you regionalized it because being a Big Ten area, we may have had a little heartburn. We may have had to cut this interview off short, maybe. I don't know. no, I no, Greg's brought up a good point. We've had these chats ourselves here on our podcast that in my state, we're starting to see what we call the start of a renaissance, and talking with some other Grand Lodges, especially on the East Coast, they're starting to see some of the same things too. That social media has, as Greg said, it's kind of fake. It doesn't. There's a human need. There's a human need for connection, and social media does not fully meet it. And we're starting to see, especially in your age group, up to men in their 40s that are interested in Freemasonry. So, so you say that you belong to some other fraternal orders. What else do you belong to outside of Freemasonry?
the greatest organization, a part of the National Panhellenic Council, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, also an honorary member of Kappa Kappa Psi National Band Honor Society, Alpha Psi Omega, which is the National Theater Honor Society, and a plethora of others. But Freemasonry and Kappa Alpha Psi is probably the main two that are closest to my heart.
No, I know I can see that. That's because my also understanding is we're seeing kind of a resurgence of college Greek life, and I think that's a precursor to the possibility of a resurgence of things like, Freemasonry, even things like Odd Fellowship. I see that the American Legion is starting to grow. They're doing a lot more outreach. So I think that society's starting to kind of edge back to the idea of community, and that's when everything from churches to Freemasonry to other civic groups and things like that have enjoyed success. So what do you see yourself? Do Are you able to? What are you gonna do, I guess, to add to your lodge journey? What else do you see yourself maybe getting involved in going forward to kind of extend and the concept of further light and such? What do you see yourself doing maybe here in the future, maybe beyond lodge?
Really to just be a helping hand, in any way I can.
Hopefully you'll advance, you'll become master of your lodge. Of other Masonic organizations that you've joined, maybe some that you haven't joined yet, do you see yourself getting active in something beyond with a Masonic organization beyond your activity with lodge?
I would say so. I'm very interested to just see what leadership independent bodies look like. Very interested to see just what the opportunities within Shrine looks like, specifically in Shriners Children's Hospital, the many opportunities through there. I mean, just really hopefully wanting to get my feet wet where with whatever interests me. I think that's what's so great about all of our organizations is you don't just have to be succumbed with your blue lodge or just the dealings with your lodge. You can cross out with right care, things like that, with obviously Shriner Children's Hospital that I mentioned previously, or whether that's, making research papers on just the many aspects in Freemasonry or just whatever topic that Masonic or esoteric that pops into your mind. Anything that I kind of just like have an interest in, I'm wanting to reach out and try to see what really just fuels that interest and how can I further evolve that.
Okay, now, I remember you say you belong to York Rite and Shrine. They may be out of state, but you belong to York Rite and Shrine. I don't remember. Did you say you belong to Scottish Rite?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And you belong to Scottish Rite there in Mississippi?
In Mississippi and in Arkansas, yes.
Okay, well, that's great. That's great. So yes, hopefully you'll get some opportunities outside of lodge and really add to your journey. I would highly recommend you do that.
I guess, what is your major and what are your plans for your career?
I graduated Mississippi State with 3 majors in political science, communications with a concentration in theater and marketing. Currently a law student, so hopefully
Oh,
we'll pass the
wow.
bar one and we'll be practicing somewhere in America.
Yeah, I was a
Oh, that's great.
poli-sci major and was going to go to law school and didn't want to graduate with crippling debt, so I did not go to law school. But my hats off to you for doing so. That's awesome. And then my last question to you is, what embarrassing stories can you share about Lucas Minton?
I would say
I'm just kidding.
I would say
Lucas
my
is a
most
great
embarrassing
dude, but yeah, let's put him on the spot.
I would say most
That's fine.
embarrassing story regarding Lucas Mitten was, I actually see one and a semi-recent one. I'll go to there's a reason the most resource. See, Lucas has been hyping up, was hyping up since I met him. And so for months I'd said, "Hey, Lucas, what's the plans for it? I know you're going, like, what's housing accommodations?" And his words were, "I'm working on it." And so "I'm working on it" was said probably 6 times during our mini conversations. And so the weekend of Guthrie comes. I just happen to be out of town for a separate conference. And I see on Facebook Lucas and everyone else is in Guthrie. So I texted him and said, "Hey, are you still working on it?" He said, "I'm still working on it." The second embarrassing one happens to be at Little Rock's fall reunion, where a little too many libations were involved. And let's just say someone that won't be named engulfed a whole jar of Mad Dog 2020 and ran around the temple, not knowing what mayhem would ensue.
Maybe we'll just leave
That's
that story where it's
that's
at then, right?
that's the
See if I can get that.
future Grandmaster of Arkansas for you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. No, Lucas, I love Lucas to death, and I thank
Yeah.
Lucas for introducing me to you, Cameron. I just think you're an upstanding young man, and I think your future's so bright. And I'm truly blessed to have get to, have you as a friend and as a brother Masonically. And I just really want to thank you for coming on the podcast and just sharing your experiences. And man, we'll have you back on in a few years to check in on you. And I hope to, meet you in person sooner rather than later. So, if you ever make your way to Illinois, you're welcome here, and we'd love to get to meet you and get to know you better. So I just want to say all the best to you and thank you again from the bottom of my heart for coming on. It means a lot to me. And if I can ever do anything for you, name it. Okay, bro. Seriously. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all again as well.
Yeah. Cameron, great having you tonight. Want to wish you the best of luck in law school. And if law school doesn't work out, you can always get your own podcast going. And it looks like we lost him. So anyway, so that'll conclude this episode. Thank you everybody for listening in to another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part.